that we have been having for the past 2 days. Of course, we know the earth needs it, the animals need it, the plants need it. We all need the water. Today, we are going to be having a discussion on rehabilitation and reintegration of inmates into the society. And I have with me for this discussion Mr. Terence James, who is the Commissioner of Corrections at Her Majesty's Prison, and Ms. Virgil Hodge, who is Principal Officer at Her Majesty's Prison. To both of you, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Good afternoon.
Individuals living in prisons are there to have certain freedoms of life restricted after being convicted of criminal activities. The goal of prison is to both punish and rehabilitate the inmates, with the intent that upon release, an inmate has a higher chance of re-entering society and functioning without criminal activity. Although not all inmates participate in rehabilitation programs, some rehabilitation programs include educational, spiritual, work, and transitional programs. Today, that will be our discussion, not so much on punishment, because that's a part of it, but we are going to highlight the whole area of rehabilitation of prisoners so that there is not repeat offenders, or what we call recidivism. Of course, we know Her Majesty's Prison, some people refer to it as 1840, because that is the year in which it was built, and it was built by the British in colonial times. And it is situated, of course, next to the police headquarters on Keon Street. So it's almost as though you come from the from the prison from the police to the prison. And it was designated to accommodate 60 inmates. Well, we have long passed 60 inmates in terms of its accommodation. There is a song that Lucky Dube sang, the late Lucky Dube, who was a reggae artist out of South Africa. And in the first verse of his song, he said, "Somebody told me about it when I was still a little boy. He said to me, crime does not pay. He said to me, education is the key. Yeah, as a little boy, I thought I knew what I was doing. But today, here I am in jail." Education. In that verse of the song, he said, education is the key. It is the key. And when we are speaking about rehabilitation, it is a whole exercise in education. So I want to start with Ms. Hodge. What sort of a rehabilitation programs do we have at the prison in terms of education?
Good afternoon to our listening audience. The programs that we have currently at the prison to rehabilitate academic classes, we have secondary and we have tertiary classes as well. We have vehicle mechanics, welding, building construction. We have the RGI band, which is one of the prison popular band, tailoring, agriculture, art and craft, mentoring, counseling, conflict resolution, religious instructions, welfare assistance, and substance abuse disorder treatment, and last but not least, behavioral therapy. the one that tops all of these, I would say, is the educational program, which we been having for almost 4 years now, where the prisoners themselves have the opportunity to teach civilians. And currently we have that program that is taking place at the Maurice Hillier Memorial School from 5 to 7, Monday to Thursdays, where the prisoners actually go out and teach most of the subject areas to civilians.
Right. I'll come back to you, Ms. Hodge, but we are going to look at, of course, why are we doing this? And what do we hope to achieve in terms of an outcome? Now, Commissioner, you were a law enforcement officer for many years.
32 years.
32 years. And now you have moved from law enforcement into a correctional facility, Her Majesty's Prison. And of course, your perspective would have changed somewhat, moving from enforcing the law now to that of dealing with inmates and the whole rehabilitation process. On reflecting upon this, how do you see it?
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for the question. Good afternoon to all our listeners and viewers out there in Radio Land. It's always a pleasure to be here at ZIZ Studio, imparting some knowledge and having the discussion with the general public as to what happened at Her Majesty's Prison. As you would have outlined, I have had over 32 years in the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force, so more than half of my life I've been in law enforcement. This has been another chapter of my life in law enforcement, in being, now I'm taking up the post of the Commissioner of Corrections. A little background for myself too is that I started off work as a teacher at the Keon Secondary School. And being in the police force, I had just about 10 years in the police academy. So teaching was always in my blood. And so now, as the Commissioner of Corrections, since taking up the post there, I've embarked on a journey of implementing rehabilitation program and building on what is there so far. I must definitely, one name that comes to mind is Mr. Nourish Nittal. Mr. Nittal has been the individual who would have laid the groundwork, so to speak, for the academic program in the Her Majesty's Prison. So I'm not here to take put any feather in my cap as to say that Mr. James is the one who is spearheading the academic program in the prison. Mr. Nittal would have laid the foundation, and so I'm only here to build on what is there. As you mentioned, that rehabilitation has to play an integral part in Her Majesty's Prison operation, because everybody have the perception that once you go to prison, that's it, you're locked away. And so you've been sent to the prison as your punishment for whatever crime you would have been committed. And so our job as members of the staff of the prison is to train that individual when they would have come into the prison, so that they would be going out as a different individual. Because we have seen that the recidivism we have a high number of recidivism. Most of the persons keep coming back into the prison. It's just a revolving door. In recent time, I had reason to speak to one of the members of the DPP's office, and he drew it to my attention that he realized that he'd been prosecuting some of the same persons over and over and over. And so I indicated to him, well, it seemed like you are just seeing the picture now, that we have in this recidivism, and it's the same person we're offending. And so we have taken it up that the rehabilitation program in the prison must take root, and so that inmates, when they come into the prison, that they go out and when they are discharged, they discharge as a different individual. And so that's why we are here to enlighten the general public and to show the public that there are some positive things that is happening in the prison. It's not all bad and negative things is happening in the prison. There are some positive things that is coming out of the prison because of our rehabilitation programs.
Right. You know, rehabilitation is not something that should begin in prison. The very fact is that guiding persons in society, providing that, you know, the care, the love, the correction of persons in society should be one of an all of society approach.
Yes.
In the sense that, you know, yes, we have the family, that family unit, and the family is responsible for molding, for shaping, for socializing young people to integrate healthily into the society. And then we have the schools,
yes,
where people go to school and of course they're educated and they're taught in terms of, you know, what kind of choices they should make, what type of decisions they should make, and the consequences, of course, when you make choices and you make certain decisions. And then you have the church, of course, which is another socializing institution where people learn in terms of what is right and wrong from a biblical perspective and so on. And so all of society is not just about the prison and the prison taking part in rehabilitating people. Usually when people reach to prison is when something would have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And so therefore, there has to be a preventative approach to the socializing of persons in the society so that they do not reach to the prison. When they reach to the prison, it means they would have already made a choice, a decision, and now they are suffering the consequences for it. All is not lost, of course.
Yes.
You know, people should be given second chances and so on. But I just wanted to know that rehabilitation does not start at the prison.
That's correct. That's correct. As you mentioned, the family is an integral part of society. We know the old man should train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he shall not depart from it. And so if you start instilling the right and wrong in a child from the early age, they will definitely stay on the straight and narrow. As you would have mentioned that when an individual do reach to the prison, it's because something has definitely gone wrong. Sometimes we hear today a parent will say they can't go with a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old. How are we reaching to that stage that a parent cannot control a 4, 5, 6-year-old child today? We know in the past, when you reach 5, 6-year-old, you start going to the Sunday school. And the Sunday school played a very integral part in our youth, bringing us up in the generation gone before. And so I don't know from where I sit here how we're going to get all the children to start going to Sunday school. We know we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4 Sunday school on a Sunday starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe 8 o'clock, and you're going to Sunday school until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And so will we be going back to those days? We don't know. We can try. The schools, sometimes we reach to a stage now where police have to be stationed at the schools to keep security at the schools. That is the way our society has been going. The church, we have. There are times when we call on the church only for certain things. We think that the church should be there all the time. Some people only want the church for certain things. The church also plays an integral part in our society. We've been saying all the time that we are a Christian society, but As I said, sometimes people only want the church for certain occasions. But the church definitely would play an integral part in our society. We at Her Majesty's Prison, we also have different denomination of church comes into our prison and have sessions with the inmates. For the most part of this year, well, we know the COVID-19 would have disrupted the entire world, and so our church service and pastors and religious groups coming into the church, that was put on hold because of the COVID protocols. But we are looking forward in restarting those programs where we have different churches, denominations will come in and have spiritual sessions with the inmate. The inmates really are looking forward to that also. So we are hoping in short order to recommence that again at this time.
I have seen, Commissioner, a paradigm in terms of parenting where, of course, you know that children learn that something is not wrong when they're very, very young. They learn that something is wrong and something is right based on punishment. The child will know that I must not do this if the child is punished.
Yes.
But at the very same time, the child must learn as the child grows. The reason I must not do this is because of the consequence of doing it.
Yes.
And sometimes you find that in parenting, people look to the punishment model rather than the instruction model. So therefore, the child is punished, but you never explain to the child why you are punished.
Yes.
Right? So you don't do something because of the fear of punishment. You don't do something because you know it is wrong. And the consequences that your wrong behavior is going to bring about. So we need to move away from that, where, of course, people will learn, you know, the consequences of their actions,
yes,
rather than just, you know, the fear of punishment.
Well, you can answer it better than that, Mr. William, because persons have to understand that as adults too, when you would have break the law, run amok of the law, there are consequences. And so one of the consequences that you might end up go to prison. And that is how the world goes. That is how the world operates. That each country have their laws, just like in your house, the child know that they can't do that, and that is wrong. And if you do that, there are punishment or consequences. It's the same thing for an adult. When adults would have breached the law of the land, there are consequences. You will be taken to the court. The court, they'll have a process, and the end result, you can be sent to prison. There's another mantra: ignorance to the law is no excuse. One is expected to know the law. Yes, an individual cannot know all the law of the land, but because you know right from wrong, nobody have to tell you that thou shalt not steal. You know that you can't take another person's property. You should not take another person's property. And if you do, you are doing something wrong, and there are consequences. Okay? So adults have to understand that if you breach the law, you will be taken before the court, and you can be sentenced to the prison. That's why people reach to the prison. When you reach to the prison now, it's a different environment. Some of your rights have been taken away because you can't move freely as you would like to move if you wasn't in prison. So the right to liberty has been taken away. But all of your rights have not been taken away. You're a human being and you still have some rights. And so we have to, as the Commissioner of Correction and the staff, I have to ensure that an individual rights are maintained when they reach into the prison. And so, yes, we do not want to infringe on person's rights, but individuals have to understand that once you are in the prison, there are still rules inside the prison that you must govern yourself by. Okay? There are still rules. So now that you're inside the prison, there are still rules inside the prison that you must adhere to. And so persons must understand that you cannot run amok of the law. It's the same thing in your house, in your household. A child has to understand you cannot do this. As you mentioned, that you should explain to the child, because no longer it is said that corporal punishment is going to be somehow to child abuse. So some parents do not like to use the rod anymore. They use other means as punishment. Children see that they're not being punished physically with the rod, so they sometimes take it a step further. What the Bible says, don't spare the rod to spoil the child. Sometimes you might have to use the rod sometimes. So you can use different measures, for different corrective measures.
Right. Now the whole idea of rehabilitation hinges on that of education.
Yes.
And people's ability to reason. Part of the problem that we have why people do certain things, sometimes it's a lack of the ability in terms of reasoning, in terms of what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is where education comes in. Now, Ms. Hodge, that is where you play a very pivotal role in terms of the whole education program at the prison and the rehabilitation of inmates. What have been some of your observations in terms of people who have embraced the education program at the prison in terms of their rehabilitation?
Well, like I mentioned before, the inmates figured, hey, we're already here. We might as well educate ourselves while we're here. And those who would have been under the arms of Mr. Nital, as Mr. James mentioned earlier, I had one prisoner said, you know, I was glad that I was able to meet Mr. Nital because he was able to help me become a teacher. So what that inmate did, he went on to teach prisoners. And then he went on to get his subjects, and right now he's at 23 subjects at the moment. And he also went on to teach civilians along with other inmates at Her Majesty's Prison. So they're using education as a way out to help them rehabilitate, and not only themselves, but other prisoners and civilians as well.
Right, so they're seeing the benefits of an education.
Right.
In terms of helping them to understand themselves and their world, you know, and the surroundings in which they are better.
Right.
And also in terms of, it can help them in terms of re-entering into the society.
Exactly.
In terms of getting a job, being better able to reason, and so on. And not only that, it gives them something to do and how to manage their time.
Yes.
I mean, not that, I mean, they're told what they have to do within the prison, but still there's a lot of time that they have, and that time is used productively.
Exactly, because they're there all day. Like, we give them the time from maybe 8 in the morning to 8 at night, where they can actually sit in the classroom and study the different subjects and also teach others as well. So, like I always tell them, you guys have more time than the normal children that are in high school who are taking the CSEC and the CAPE exams. You guys have at least 12 hours a day to study, and they use that to their advantage, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're so successful in the exams as well.
You know, society can be very cruel, and we have a way of writing people off. And when somebody would have committed a crime, society is very cold and unforgiving, and never allows you to forget what you would have done. And so that sort of affects the reintegration of an inmate, even one who has been rehabilitated into the society. So what do you have to say about that, Commissioner?
Well, Mr. Williams, as you mentioned, the society, the same society who tends to ask for a second chance, give a person a second chance, sometimes the society is unwilling to give an inmate a second chance. But we got to remember that we have the law and the judicial system, and persons would have gone through the judicial system, and the court, they would have been convicted for an offense by the court. They are sent to prison. They have served their time. As we say, a person would have served their debt to society. That's how a person would have served their debt to society, by serving their time in prison for the offense which they have been committed. And so once they have served their time and they are ready to be discharged back into society, I, as the commissioner, have an obligation and a responsibility to discharge that individual back into society. Now we have some inmates who would have committed the heinous of the heinous crime, murder, and so they would have gone to the judicial system. An individual is allowed to appeal his matter, and so appeal is part of the judicial system. Sometimes when a person is being given life in prison and they appeal, the life in prison can be overturned by the appeal court to a number of years in prison. Persons who would have been sentenced to be hanged or executed, their sentence by the court upon appeal would have been overturned to life in prison. Our Constitution speaks about the Governor General pardoning an individual. Section 66 of our Constitution speaks about the Governor General pardoning an individual. And so there are process and procedures that are followed to lawful, to the system, the legal system. And so persons have to understand that persons have rights, and persons go through the system, and this is how the system operates. And so persons are, when persons hear this person has been released, or this person only served this amount of time, that is because they would have gone through the system, the judicial system. In a democratic country and in democracy, a man is innocent until proven guilty. And they have the system the judicial system that it goes through. And so persons, yes, the public at times could be cruel and ask for a second chance. And sometimes when the individual gets a second chance, the same public is somewhat not lenient towards that individual. And so we have to understand that is the process and the procedure that is being followed.
Yeah, and part of you mentioned it earlier in terms of the recidivism that we may see taking place has to do because if that sort of a social, emotional, spiritual, all of society approach in terms of a network when the prisoner is released back into society, if it is not there, then that is a recipe for recidivism.
Yes.
And so therefore the person will end back up in the prison because they have not found the support that is so necessary to help them to reintegrate.
Yes, well, we have Miss Christopher at Gender Affairs. I've been in communication with her, and part of our plan and strategy going forward, we are hoping to collaborate with the prison and the Gender Affairs so that we will have a proper structure in place so that when persons are nearing their discharge time, that we can start to prepare them for reintegration into society. Mr. Warner, for Warner's One Stop, he came forward and is really willing to partner with Her Majesty's Prison so that when persons are nearing their discharge date, we can make contact with him, and he have indicated that he will make provisions, attempt to have a job lined up for one or two individuals when they would have left the prison. Because we know when an individual left Her Majesty's prison, it is quite challenging to seek employment. Because once employers would have known that you would have been incarcerated, the tone of the music changed, and you're on file, and so it's been very difficult, especially for female inmates. Once a female inmate would have been discharged back into society and she goes to seek employment, once the employer would have gotten knowledge that she was incarcerated, it's very challenging for her to get employment. And so in working with Ms. Christopher, she wanted to start programs so that would teach the inmates how to be entrepreneurs, how to start up a little business, so that when they would have left the prison, they can start their own little business and become entrepreneurs. Because it's very, very challenging when persons would have left Her Majesty's prison to get gainful employment. So that's why we are trying to have our rehabilitation program and teach them a skill, so that when they would have left, they are able to even seek employment on their own and maybe start up their own little business. So this is the direction in which we intend to go in terms of our rehabilitation programs in the prison.
Right. So we spoke about, of course, the educational aspect in terms of the CXCs and the whether they be CAPE or CSEC programs at the prison, but at the very same time, those cater to the academic. Sometimes you need programs for people to work on themselves, for example, self-help programs, because people entering the prison will need some sort of a self-help.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, maybe it could be psychological, helping them to gain self-esteem,
Yes.
and that sort of a thing, helping them with their communication skills,
Yes.
or their team building skills, you know, the interpersonal skills and those sort of a thing. What is being done in that area?
When they come in first.
Well, what happens when the inmate comes in as a remand? What I'll do, I'll normally assess them, which is a wide assessment of everything: psychological, mental, family background, criminal background. And this information helps us to understand the individual. Where are we going to place them? What rehabilitation program we're going to put them in? Like I mentioned before, we have at least 15 of them here. So that helps us to know where we're going to place them. I mean, like you said, not everybody going to be where they, you know, be educational and know at least a standard of the CAPE or the CSEC. But I have guys who comes in and probably can't read well, so now I'll have to place them in a class where I help them to read.
A literacy program.
Right. We have guys who just want to do mechanical work or welding, or just want to get in a religious program, then we place them there. So that's the first step. From assessing them, then we place them at the necessary rehabilitation program within the prison.
Right, and of course the commissioner would have mentioned that they would have had, but because of the COVID-19, and of course, you know, the prison is a place, as I said before, 60 inmates.
Yes.
And what's the population of the prison now?
As of 8 o'clock this morning, we were at 190. With out of that, we have 22 is over on the Navy's prison farm. And then we have, out of that 190, we have 5 inmates who are female. Our female population is usually small. Usually small. I was informed that the most that we would have ever had at one time, a female, is 13. But generally the female population is usually small. But as you mentioned, 1840 was constructed to house just 60 inmates. That was way back in 1840. But as time progressed, as I mentioned, as of today, we are at 190. So we definitely somewhat overcrowded in that. We would have the main structure, which we consider to be the 1840, the main building. We have also constructed 2 other smaller cells. So we're able to disseminate the numbers throughout the prison. So it's not that, even though the number is 190 as of today, we're just slightly overcrowded at this time. And so we have outgrown the space that we are presently located. We have definitely outgrown that space, because if we are to be going into rehabilitation program, it means then that we'll need to have workshop areas for mechanic, for carpentry, for the different skills area. And so we have definitely outgrown that space. The government has embarked to try and construct a new facility. And so at present, we have the land available down in the Estridge Mountain area. We already have the drawings for the new facility. And so we're just waiting and getting the funding. So government sourcing some fundings to construct the new facility. We don't have any intention of calling it no prison. It would be St. Kitts and Nevis Correctional Facility, because we're trying to correct some of the wrongs that was done by the inmate and ensure that they are rehabilitated when they would have left the institution. And so we're just keeping our fingers crossed and waiting and hoping that the government will get the funding. We know this as what we call a guava crop time. The COVID has turned the entire world upside down. Funding has been dried up. And so we're just waiting. We're hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that shortly we will get that funding to start even a new correctional facility.
Right. Now you mentioned, of course, we are in the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
Which has basically affected the entire world. Mm-hmm. And concern has been raised about prisons and other institutions, especially where it's very difficult to have sort of a social and physical distancing.
Yes.
And what is really being done to protect those institutions from being infected with the COVID-19 virus. So what has been done at Her Majesty's prison in terms of that? What protocols, measures have been put in place?
As you rightly said, the COVID-19 has been a challenge. No prison in the world is able to social distance. You're definitely unable to carry out social distance in any prison in this world. So we was on lockdown quickly. I made a decision quickly to lock down the prison on the 22nd of March, just about the time when everybody was going on a lockdown. And so thank God that our prison here in St. Kitts, we didn't have any contamination. Whereas the Guyana, there are prisons in the Caribbean region, Guyana, Trinidad, Haiti, Santo Domingo. These are some of the prisons that have seen contamination of the COVID-19. But as I said, thank God that our small prison here in the Federation, the inmates so far have been kept safe. I try my best with my staff, endeavor our best to keep the prison safe. In terms of protocol, we have our little protocols that we have implemented since March, and we still have them implemented. Once a person enters in the prison, both staff or any person entering the prison, they must be wearing a mask to come inside the prison. As soon as they enter, we have our hand sanitization stations in the different areas of the prison, but one is placed specifically right next to the entrance. We also have our thermal thermometer that checks the officer at the front will check the temperature and to ensure that person not entering the prison with any elevated temperature. Once that is done, persons, we have what is called a scanning machine, but it only scans for contraband for security purpose. So one goes through the scanning machine, and then we know that they are secured to be inside the prison. Right? We also have about 3 cells. These cells are what we call our little quarantine or segregated cells, that when inmates comes into the prison for the first time coming into the prison, we keep them in that area. We'll have the doctor, a prison doctor, check them, and then we'll have them kept in that area for 14 days as our little protocol and quarantine area before they go into the general population. So we do our little quarantining inside the prison, and this is part of our protocol, so that we can maintain our prison to be as sterile as we can for the time being. Well, we know the borders are open, has been open from the 31st of October, and so too I implore on the staff to ensure that we maintain our protocol throughout until we don't know when, but we will maintain our protocol.
Right. So what are some of the work programs that you have at the prison? Because you have the educational, and of course you spoke about the spiritual.
Yes.
And you have work programs as well.
Yes.
At the prison.
Definitely.
People can gain work experience.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have skilled officers and we have skilled inmates at Her Majesty's Prison. As a matter of fact, we recently built a barracks for the male prison officers inside the prison, and this was done and constructed by staff and inmates at Her Majesty's Prison. If you would have traveled to the Defense Force camp or passing on the highway, you will see that 2-story building at the Defense Force camp. Inmates was instrumental in constructing that structure, that edifice there at Camp Springfield. And so we are also presently building a kitchen unit on the prison farm in Nevis, and the inmates are the ones who are presently constructing that kitchen. On a daily basis, we have inmates travel to the Defense Force camp, to the motor pool, to assist with the repairs of the fleet of motor vehicles for the Defense Force and also for the prison. So we have inmates who are skilled in carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, tiles. They have inmates in there who are very skilled in laying tiles. And so we make use that these inmates who are skilled will impart their knowledge also to the other inmates. Right? We have inmates who are bakers. Her Majesty's Prison, we bake our own bread in the prison, and so we don't purchase any breads from the bakery, because we have staff members and inmates who are skilled enough to bake our bread and pastries in the prison. All right, so definitely we have a fairly good work program in the prison. One of the things that has come about is that persons, well, we are still in the hurricane season, and persons have been calling on the prison to assist in downing large trees that hang over their property and can cause damage to their property. And so we have been assisting persons in downing these large trees in the various communities. One of the things I must mention is that it takes chainsaws to cut down these trees, and so we always encourage persons that inform them that if the inmate is going to come to cut down these large trees, we're not bearing the responsibility for the gasoline and the oil and the chain and the chainsaw, and so that responsibility will be placed on the persons who are asking to get the trees cut down. And so we assist the general public in that regard, and it has been doing well so far. I think this is a skill that inmates too can develop and go into a little business when they would have left the prison, because we say that cutting lawns has been a big thing. You see everybody with a weed eater and a lawnmower today. Everybody got grass to cut, especially now that the rain is falling, you know. And so these are little skill areas that inmates can develop, so that when they would have left the prison, they will seek employment, whether they start their little business as entrepreneurs on their own, go to work with other persons. So we think our work program in the prison has been going well so far for the time being.
Commissioner, what about security at Her Majesty's prison? Because in past times there were stories about contraband getting into the prison,
yes,
cell phones and so on. Has there been an improvement in this area of prison security?
Definitely, Mr. Williams. We have seen a reduction in the contraband entering the prison. You cannot stop all contraband from entering the prison. No prison. In every prison in the world, in going on prison conference, you would hear other commissioners and superintendents indicate to you that, yes, you have contrabands entering the prison. But for sure, our prison, it has been reduced drastically in terms of, since we have implemented the scanning machine, which is like an X-ray machine. So anybody who enters the prison, even myself, every day I enter the prison, I am being scanned. I empty my pockets. I go through the scanner. They check me. And so every member of staff, every person who enters the prison goes through the scanner. But it's a machine. And sometimes people beat you with the machine. And some of the contraband gets into the prison. Illegal cell phones gets into the prison. But it's the job of the staff to find it. And there are times when we do find it, and there are times when we do not find it. It takes us a little longer to find it. But I would say yes, that contraband enter the prison, and just like all other prisons, contraband do enter the prison. But it's the job of the staff to find it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, of course, prison can be a very stressful place. A place where violence can erupt, of course, if people are stressed. Mm-hmm. One of the ways in which people deal with this, of course, is through recreation and sports. Ms. Hodge, what is being done at the prison in terms of recreational and sports activities for inmates?
Well, on a normal day, the prisoners have a couple hours for recreation, and then that's something that's by law that we have to give them. So they are able to play basketball, football. Like I said, we mentioned the guys who are in the band. They go in the band house and they practice their music. And that's the way to, free their minds in a recreational way. And of course, that would help us as officers as well to deal with them, because once their minds are free by doing these sports, sports can help you, just your mind mentally can help you be better. And I feel like we having them going out this every day and doing the recreational, it's going to help us as officers as well to deal with them. Less stress for us, as I would say.
So it is a part of the whole rehabilitation?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It's a routine, as she mentioned, it's a routine that inmates must be given recreation on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And so they comes out what we call into the yard, and they do their exercises, as she mentioned, basketball, whatever physical thing they want to do inside the yard. By law, an inmate is must be given some form of recreation. You shouldn't keep an inmate locked down 24/7. Even if they're under some sort of restriction, punishment, they must be given at least that hour for recreation, to stretch their limbs, get some sunlight out in the yard. So that is required by law, that they get their recreation. Well, this year it did not happen, but last year on the 16th of September, which is Heroes Day, the inmates normally have what we call a fun day.
Right.
And that day, at least once a year, they will have real entertainment, basketball, football. They have the calypso, the calypso show. They have the dramatization. They have the debates and those kind of things. And the Heroes Day. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have that this year because because of the COVID, a lot of things was cancelled for this year. But they usually have their recreation for which is a must, and it's for the human body also to have some sort of exercise to keep physically fit, because we don't want an inmate to get sick inside the prison. That will be much more costly than if the inmate was to be healthy, fit and healthy.
Right. Now, Commissioner, to go back to the whole area of the reintegration of inmates into the society.
Yes.
One thing that prevents the reintegration of inmates into society is that of having a criminal record. And with having a criminal record, sometimes it restricts you from having access to certain opportunities.
Yes.
For example, even for university, to apply to university, one of the questions sometimes they do ask you is do you have a criminal record?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you will not get admitted because of it, but applying for a visa, for example, or some places of employment ask if you have a criminal record.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is a deterrence for ex-inmates. When they see that question, they probably almost feel that they are doomed in terms of, getting through.
Yes, well, this is one of the instances that you say that persons can be given a second chance. I don't know the exact section of the law, but I know there was a piece of legislation that has passed that persons can get certain convictions or minor convictions expunged from their record. So there is a piece of legislation in place. I think you have to apply to the Attorney General seeking that your record, this conviction be expunged. We know that person was convicted, for example, the marijuana. Some person was convicted for maybe a small quantity, and so they would have passed legislation that persons who would have been convicted for small amount of marijuana, that the record this be expunged from the record. But there are some other offenses that persons can have expunged from their record, but it must be, I think they have to apply to the Attorney General to get that permission for it to be expunged. Because, sometimes person goes for visa at the U.S. Embassy, and once they see you have, sometimes they see you have a conviction, a criminal conviction, you don't get the visa. So it's good that persons can be given a second chance and have certain criminal convictions be expunged from their record, so that when they're being discharged back into society, they could probably have a clean record and going forward. Because, as I said, when a man would have paid his debt to society, you can't hold that against him for the rest of his life. As they say, sometimes when a person apologizes, if you sincerely accept that apology, you can't hold that against that person for the, well, it's the same thing. If a person would have paid their debt to society, you shouldn't hold that against him for the rest of his life. Sometimes, as I say, society can be cruel at times. Society might forgive, but they don't forget. It's always on their mind, so sometimes you have to just give persons a second chance.
Just to elaborate a bit on Mr. James would have said, this year, as the officer in charge of rehabilitation, I would have sat with the National Security Advisor, Mr. Saunders.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we realized that, yes, inmates go out and they don't have a job. And it's very hard for them and their families, of course, because they're talking about inmates who have maybe kids who are depending on them, even when they're in prison, never mind when they're out. And so one of the things that me and Mr. Saunders, along with the commissioners, helped, we said that we are going to try and get these individuals on the STEP program, on the peace program when they're out. And we have been successful. A matter of fact, with that, we were able to help at least 3 prisoners who came out of prison this year and would have gotten them a job with the help of the ACP, Mr. Adams. And they were able to get on that peace program, and they're able to help their families, because that's a big thing. We come out of prison and we don't have a job. You know, what am I going to do? And then we see them come back to prison because they probably go on and steal just to support their families. So I think that's something that we would have started this year, and hopefully we can continue doing it for the future to help the inmates.
If I may, Mr. Williams, I would have spoken to one of the counsel at the legal department, and she would have indicated to me that she would have attended a conference one time, and one of the things that the ILO, International Labour Organization, is trying to put in place is that inmates, when they're incarcerated and they work, they should at least be paid the minimum wage. Because as Ms. Hodge would have mentioned, that there are times when inmates go to the prison and they would have been the breadwinner in the family. And so now they are incarcerated. And so as the counsel was telling me that when you would have inmates doing work, that they should be at least be paid at least the minimum wage. Yes, things are changing. We know in the past, once you've been sentenced to Her Majesty's prison, you go there and hard labor. And you just work and no pay. But we have to understand that things are changing, and the father would have been the breadwinner, gone to prison. The child is out there. The mother can't support the child alone and can't provide for the child. And so what we have been trying to do sometimes when inmates with the skills are in prison, and someone wants something done, we at times allow that inmate to go and perform the work, not at the market value cost, because we don't want to appear to be competing with the man out there who is doing it for his daily living. But at least some persons call on the prisoner and ask, I have this to do, can I get some inmates to do this for me? And we have inmates there with the skills, so we let them know, okay, we can have the inmate because the inmates provide some high-class work. And so we would have tell them, okay, we are not charging you the market value price, but if you can contribute something to the inmate, a little stipend, we would appreciate that. And that is placed, each inmate have what we call a commissary account, a little account in the prison, where if they make $200-300 from a little job, that goes into the account. If they do 2, 3, 4 jobs, you see that they can get at least $500-600 there on the account. During July, August, when it's time to go back to school, inmates would send out a little $200, $300 to their child to purchase a school bag or a school shoe. And so because they were the providers for their child and their family. And so we have to remember that some point in time, this individual will be discharged from the prison and he has to go back to his family. And so we try and maintain that contact, allow the inmate to maintain that contact with his family by whether it's a phone call or we have what they call contact visit, where the mother can bring the child into the prison to even have a 15-20 minutes visit with the father to maintain that contact. And so these are things that we do so that when inmates are discharged back into society, they would have still had that contact with their family, even though they were incarcerated.
That's a very important point that you mentioned, Commissioner, because having that separation of the father, especially from the child, there is this loss that can take place through the separation.
Yes.
Of course, and, you know, children grieve, you know, not having the presence of their father.
Yeah.
Not just financially, but the whole emotional and psychological and physical support as well, which is important. And that is one of the disadvantages, of course, of some of people going to prison.
Yes.
Because it affects the family. We are going to go to the phone lines. The numbers to call are 466-2666. That's 466-2666. 662-8674. 662-8674. 767-4765. 767-4765. And our international number is 1-239-645-4500. 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls. Now, Commissioner,
yes,
in recent times there has been a sort of thinking, or let me put it this way, a sort of a philosophy that it's a rite of passage that you're hearing now, that some people feel as though, you know, going to jail, that they would have achieved something. And some of the young women are saying, well, my man has been to jail, and so therefore it's almost like it's some rite of passage, and so therefore it is something really to be proud of. What sort of age group, average age group, if you can tell me what we have in the prison now?
Well, we have persons from 18 years up to 65 at present.
But the average?
The average would be about 35. Between about 35.
20 to 35.
Yeah, because most of the youngsters there too can be between 20 to 35. So if we have the average can vary. It can vary. I would not say I will give you the definite average, but
yes, but the fact of the matter is that most of them you mentioned, from 20 to 35, that is the prime of one's life.
Yes.
In terms of, you know, when they can be most productive to society, and so it depends on what they are there for. They can be there for quite a number of years in the prison, which would subtract from that productivity and, of course, their advancement.
Yes, because when you would have spent more, I was seeing from a police side when I was a police officer, most of the individuals who would have been charged for murders was between 18 to like 25, that age group. And so when they would have gotten convicted and then go to prison, they would have spent most of their youthful life, their productive life, incarcerated. And so as you were mentioning that the young ladies feel hyped that their boyfriend would have been to prison. Going to prison can never be a good thing, Mr. Williams. I'm there in the prison now for just over a year, and I have my cap, my police cap from enforcement to now being the person in charge of the prison. I'm seeing a different mentality and a different side of the human being. I've spoken to inmates, and inmates are showing me that, okay, we have the peace truce that is happening now in the Federation, and I'm seeing that it is trickling down, the peace is trickling down into the prison because we are not having the hostility inside the prison, which is a very good thing. The peace initiative is definitely working. However you want to put it, however you want to look at it, it is working because we are seeing that we're not having the shootings, we are not seeing the hostility in the prison, and so we are thankful for that. As I was saying, the youngsters who are there, they have hindsight is 20/20. Now that they are sitting back and look back and see they would have made a mistake. Because here you have a peace. They could have been outside there enjoying the peace also. And now they are incarcerated and they cannot move and they cannot do whatever they would like to do at this time. And so it's really getting to them. And so they are just hoping that the time will come that they will have solved their time, pay their debt to society, and would have been, returned to society. And so, yes, it's the young persons, the young fellas, that the young age group that is there in the prison now, that an average age, as you say, maybe between, as I said, between the 20 and 35 years of age is more of the average age group that is presently there at Her Majesty's prison.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we have from the statistics that you gave, we have more men than women in the prison, and a lot of the work activities and so on, for example, general mechanic, the welding, and things like that are more geared towards the male gender.
Yes.
Now, what do you have? What sort of special programs do you have for the female population in the prison, although they be in the minority?
Yes, as I mentioned, Miss Christopher and her team at the Gender Affairs, I would have had meeting with her and her staff, and they had planned to start. We was planning to start actually in March of this year, just when we had the lockdown. Things like anger management, arts and crafts, making things with crafts with various materials, showing them how to start up a business, entrepreneurship. These were some of the areas that we were planning to start with the females. As I said, the female number is very small, and so when you hear about the prisons or programs, you tend mostly to think about for the men. The female section in the prison, the female is completely separated from the male section, and so these are some of the programs that we would have liked to start inside the prison. We have actually at one time, Mrs. Malalu, the former magistrate, she wanted to start what do you call it? Floral arrangement in the prison with the female, because she thinks that this is something that a female inmate can start up on her own, floral arrangement. So there are other persons who are willing to come forward and have start up programs so it's just for us to put proper structure in place so that we can have them going. But Miss Christopher, as I said, Miss Christopher, Gender Affairs, she have the female section of the prison at heart, and she is always willing, and her staff willing to come and partner with us. And so my arms are open for her and her staff to come and really have the programs with the female inmates at the prison.
Right. Now, being in prison, of course, can institutionalize you, in the sense that your freedom has been curtailed.
Yes.
That when you are released back into society, you can have some problems with reintegration, readjustment. I remember some time ago looking at a movie which was, the star was Morgan Freeman.
Shawshank
Redemption. That is called Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, I saw the movie.
And there was a prisoner there who was in the prison for so long that when he came out and he went to work, he asked to go to the bathroom.
Yes.
And he was told, around here, you don't ask, you just go.
Right.
And then also, the prisoner could not really deal with society and having to reintegrate and readjust to society, having been there for so long. Now, the question is, do you have any sort of a transitional program in the prison that help inmates prepare for release and then guide them back to successful entry into the prison? Because, I mean, there will be fears, of course, you know, for example, counseling before they get back into the society. They might have anxiety and all of that sort of a thing.
Yes, we have a residence counselor in the prison. She have regular sessions with the inmates. Sometimes inmates come and see me, and I will refer them to the counselor. So we do have a resident counselor in the prison who do counseling. As Ms. Hodge would have mentioned earlier that she was in contact with the NSA, the National Security Advisor, and I would have spoken to him. And part of the plan in going forward is that when inmates are coming close to be discharged back into society, we know that when they will be discharged, so we will make contact with the NSA and see how we can get these persons some sort of employment. Okay. We live in a small society in St. Kitts and Nevis. Everybody knows everybody, basically. And so when a person is being discharged into society, somebody might have seen you when you were in prison before. And so it's a challenge, as I mentioned, it's a challenge for persons to gain employment.
And to deal, not just in terms of gaining employment,
but to deal with society.
But to deal with the stigma and the discrimination, how one is viewed. We do have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon. Hello? Seem to have lost that caller. Yes.
Yes, as you was mentioning, the stigma of dealing with society. Because I could recall as a youngster growing up, one could tell when someone come from prison. They used to say, you just check his head. You see his head look gap, as the colloquial term, look gap up. All right? People have to understand that.
Or you use certain derogatory terms, that you're a jailbird.
Right, you're a jailbird. All right? And so we have moved away from that term, jailbird, and we try to use the word inmate. You're an inmate. We don't even so much like to use the word prisoner. We try to use the word inmate now, because things are changing and things are evolving. And so human rights plays an integral part in society now. And so you have to treat people humanely. So even though one would have been discharged back into society, you can't really use the stigma as that you are jailbird, and so you don't want to have anything to do with you. And so as you mentioned that you would have to somewhat prepare the individual for when they would be discharged back into society. All right? People usually when you would have been to prison, people just have that stigma towards you, that you're in jail, you were in jail, and sees you in a different light. All right? I always make mention of King Sakoti. I mean, I'm calling his name. I'm not calling his name in any disrespectful way or anything like that. But I always give people the example of King Sakoti. I remember I just joined the police force in 1987. And in 1988, I think it was, when he sang the song.
We do have a caller.
All right.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leroy.
Good afternoon, sir.
And your guest them there, both of the Mr. Williams and the good lady.
Miss Hodge, Virgin
Hodge.
Hodge.
Miss Hodge.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
Right, I have maybe 3 questions. Oh, good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
Okay, you had 7 seconds delay. Now, 3 questions for any one of you there. Now, Mr. Adjan, the lady there, I would ask the first question. In the prison, is there anything named hard labor? And then a second question is, why do the judge sentence somebody to prison with hard labor? That's 2. And the third question, do you think anybody have any right to be in prison for marijuana? Because marijuana is not a weapon, and it's neither dangerous nor nothing. Marijuana is like coconut, salsa, breadfruit, whatsoever it is. And to me, my opinion, no one should be in prison for the possession of marijuana. I don't think so. So my question is that, do you think anybody supposed to be in prison for marijuana? Those 3 questions. I listen to half the ear. Thank you very much.
All right, caller. Your first question deal with, you asked what is hard labor. Well, hard labor is labor as we consider is any kind of work. And so when the judge would have sentenced you to prison, normally they would put your sentence with a hard labor. They wouldn't put any labor on the committal warrant. Well, we know from time immemorial, way back when, we know hard labor in prison used to be chopping wood, putting the fiber in the yard, as someone mentioned it sometime before. Yes, inmates still go out to do work. We have our prison farm where we do our agriculture, plant our crops, and so inmates will go to the farm to do work. Inmates who are on remand do not do any work in the prison. By law, you cannot give inmates who are remanded, meaning that they are waiting in the prison for their trial. We cannot give them any work to do. But as long as you're being convicted by the court, usually the court will sentence you to prison for hard labor. And hard labor means any kind of work to do, whether inside the prison compound itself or outside. Sometimes government institution call and need some kind of work done. And so we will detail a gang, what we call a gang, a group of the inmates to go out and perform this work. Some of them do it on a daily basis. So yes, that is what we call the labor. But if you want to call it hard labor, inmates used to go to the Springfield Cemetery to cut the grass there. They no longer does that. In parks and beaches, I think would do that in the prison. I mean, in the cemetery. You asked about should person go to prison for marijuana? Well, everyone is aware that that's a different discussion at this time. I wouldn't want to go too much into that, but I can say that the government would have passed a piece of legislation where persons are allowed to have a certain amount of quantity. Yeah. The Rastafarian now is allowed to have it in their place of their religious, where they're going to perform their religious and of their song. When they have in their religious things for the Rastafarian, what do you call it, religion. And so things have changed. As I told people, when I was a police officer, when I see someone smoking a spliff, so to speak, I ready to take it and take them to the court. Now it's a different thing. Persons are allowed to have a certain amount of quantity for personal use according to the law that was passed. Marijuana is beginning to be decriminalized. So this is a whole new conversation in dealing with the marijuana. To answer your question, if someone should be in jail for marijuana, I can't, as I sit here, I can't say yes or no. Because if persons have a large quantity and they have to go to the court and the court convict them for trafficking, they're sentenced to prison for whatever the court decides. All I have to do as the commissioner is to receive them into the prison once they are sentenced by the court. So I wouldn't sit here and say no, yes, that a person should be in prison for marijuana.
Yes, I think the question of marijuana and its use or its abuse is a deeper conversation
Yes.
that needs to be had, because, I mean, from a medical point of view, psychological point of view, there, of course, is talk of young people and how marijuana may interfere with the development of their brain and development of their judgment.
Correct.
And all of that sort of a thing, which in a sense can affect people in terms of their judgment in doing certain things, and which may just land them in jail and so on because they did not use right judgment. Now, of course, people being in prison, Commissioner, is a financial burden on the state. It can be. It decreases the productivity in society and the economy. It affects family life. And these are some of the negatives of being in prison.
Yes.
What basically can be done in terms of alternative sentencing for people to basically go to prison?
Well, I would have attended a conference in Uruguay last year in September, and it was a conference to deal with alternative sentencing, where community, given persons community duties by the court instead of sending them to prison for certain offenses, and even sometimes a first-time offender. You take a young individual who might have run amok of the law and you send him to prison. Sometimes it's good to give that person community service. In some other jurisdiction, they give you community service and ensures that you carried out the community service, because you can give community service and the person still ain't carry out the community service, which means that they have not carried out the sentence of the court. And so you'll have to ensure that the community service is carried out by the court. Sometimes mitigation might for some offenses you might have to have mitigation that might not even need, the matter might not even need it to go to court. And so you can have mitigation in avoiding, because person getting convicted in the court and being sent to prison. But one of the key things is community service has been one of the major alternative sentence that other jurisdictions are looking at to instead of sending people to prison. So that is one of the major alternative sentence, community service.
Right, because sometimes when you look at the prison populations, prisons are basically filled with, and even look at the models in some of those developed countries, it really shows inequalities.
Yes.
Racial inequalities, economic inequalities, social inequalities, and so on. Sometimes it's poor people,
yes,
black people, Hispanics, unemployed, uneducated, and so on. So these things need to be addressed from a societal standpoint, and that is why it has to be an all-of-society approach. And if those things are addressed, then we might have less people in our prisons.
Yes, and as you mentioned, it's very expensive. It's very expensive to and a burden and the government to run a prison. And you must feed a prisoner 3 times per day. Our budget in the prison, the meals takes up most of our budget, and so what we have embarked on is to try and increase our production in our agriculture production, so that we can reduce that budget cost for feeding. We know food security has been a big thing on the agenda of the government since the COVID, and so we have kind of stepped up our production on our farm at Needmust, so that we can produce more vegetables and more crops to really reduce the budget for feeding. As you mentioned, the prison, when an individual comes to the prison, the state have a responsibility to take care of that inmate from the time he comes to the gate until he leaves. And so an individual comes into the prison, you have to feed him 3 times a day. His medicals has to be paid by the state. Sometimes inmates come to the prison, they never even ever get an x-ray. You got to give them an x-ray. You got to pay for that. You understand? Medical, sometimes they need special referral to a specialist doctor, and the state have to pay for that. If they was outside, they're on their own. But once they come to the prison gate, the state have a responsibility to take care of that individual until they are discharged back into society. So it is very expensive to run a prison, and it is very costly to the government. Yes, people always say they're inside here eating taxpayers' money, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's a human right
Yes.
to be food, clothing, and shelter are basic human rights that nobody should be deprived of. Now, before we leave, Commissioner, we are basically out of time. And of course, you can't have a prison. We have prisoners, yes, but we have staff at the prison.
Yes.
Prison staff, wardens, and so on. What sort of a professional development or ongoing formation is provided for your staff to help them to be better in terms of what they do?
All right. The prison, all the prisons in the Caribbean now falls on the impacts, which is based in Trinidad, and so the prisons, all training that involves prisons, the impacts is responsible for the training, and so we have had. This is the order of the day now, Zoom training. And so almost every month we've been having training with the staff, the different members of the different prison institutions around the Caribbean. We've been having training sessions, and as a matter of fact, next week we are having a cybercrime investigation in prisons training. And so members of the staff have been given training on a regular basis. We have made good contact with the U.S. Embassy, and so members of the staff at Her Majesty's Prison had the opportunity, half of the staff had the opportunity to travel to Barbados to see the prison in Barbados, which is a much larger prison, and how it operates and how it functions. And so the second half of the staff at Her Majesty's Prison was preparing to travel to Barbados for them to get that experience to like the first half, but the COVID would have cancelled that, and so we are hoping that we will get that opportunity when things calm back down. As a matter of fact, I have a member of staff, a junior member of staff, who recently achieved a bachelor's degree in criminology at Her Majesty's Prison, and so we have Miss Bell, which is a BGO, a basic grade officer. She recently achieved a bachelor's degree in criminology at Her Majesty's Prison. So we have members of staff who are trying to up themselves academically and put their best foot forward. As members of staff, if you are having inmates who are going to be involved in certain skill or work, it means that members of staff also have to get that knowledge. If you have inmates who are going to be doing carpentry, then you should have a staff who have the skills and knowledge in carpentry. Mm-hmm. If you're doing some inmates doing general mechanic, then you should have a staff who knows some mechanic skills. And so we are trying to get the staff to develop themselves in the various fields of skills so that they can also pass on to the inmates to develop themselves while they're there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Hodge, do you have any parting words for us?
Well, I just want to kind of show some objectives why we do have the rehabilitation program at Her Majesty's Prison, and it's to reduce and eliminate the stigma that we mentioned earlier and discrimination associated with persons who have been convicted. And we also want to help reshape and reposition Her Majesty's Prison in the minds of the population of St. Kitts. Also to create, sustained and maintain a positive image of the work done by staff at Her Majesty's Prison for safety, security, and stability. And lastly, effectively equip inmates with the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities and experiences necessary for them to reintegrate back into society and to release, thereby reducing the possibility of recidivism. And lastly, I just want to also congratulate those inmates who would have passed the exams this year for CAPE and CSEC. Like I said, these guys are always on top. Once you come with the results in those specific exams, and I want to congratulate them, and also I want to tell them to keep putting their best foot forward, and we at Her Majesty's Prison are there to support them no matter what.
Okay, well, thank you to both of you, Mr. Terence James, our Commissioner of Corrections at Her Majesty's Prison, and Ms. Virgil Hodge, Principal Officer at Her Majesty's Prison. Thank you for the work that you're doing in terms of the rehabilitation of prisoners so that they can be properly reintegrated into our society, the reintegration of inmates, and we reduce the rate of recidivism in our society. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to all of you who joined our program today, Working for You. Next week, we will be back for another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams. Take care.
Thank you.